recording now. And you see all this people. I was just talking to my boyfriend about this hentai that I read, which is, well, if you could tell by his things, it's not a very good hentai. Don't read it. But I was just telling how I finished it. For those of you that are interested in what I'm talking about, it's I'm not gonna summarize it. They can look it up if they want. But it's called Emergence or Metamorphosis. I'll let you look it up, Google it. Like, don't look it up, viewers. I mean, if they just want to know the summary, just don't. Yeah, I summarized it to him. I won't summarize it. But I was just telling him how, man, I just feel empty. And the ending of that just didn't make me feel good at all. Just like the ending of this book won't make you feel good at all. Yeah. But yeah, read it at your own discretion. You've been warned by all of this text. It's not for everyone. It's not for most people, probably. Okay, but we shall get back to the book, because we're almost done with the book. It's not for anyone. Don't read it. He's technically right. It's not for anyone. Except maybe the person that created the manga. Okay. Well, we've talked enough about that on the recording so far. I'm not going to go into any more depth about it. You guys can look it up if you want. But yeah, let's start reading. This is probably going to take maybe an hour, maybe an hour and a half. There is this one. Oh, this is just, yeah, I don't think I'm gonna read that part. Because it's just, after the actual ending of the book, there's, by the author, not the story anymore, but it's just the author saying some of his, the chapter is called Some Last Words on Last Words. And it's basically his take on people's last words. I don't think I'm gonna read it, or maybe I will read it, but I'm not gonna include that in the thumbnail or the title of this last one. Yeah, I'm just gonna do like the book, and then that will be extra, if you know what I mean. Okay. So, we are we are here. Yeah, this might even take an hour. Well, with the way I'm talking, it might take longer. Or stalling, I mean. Yeah, last last time. Well, last time Pudge and the Colonel. Oh, they told Takumi. No, Takumi's trying to help them. Uh, Lara and Pudge are trying to be friends again. But yeah, that's about it. Alright, so. Alright, yeah. This next chapter is called 69 Days After. A week after the discovery of the doodled flower, I'd resigned myself to its insignificance. I wasn't Banzan in the meat market after all. And as the maples around campus began to hint of resurrection and the maintenance crew began mowing the grass in the dorm circle again, it seemed to me we had finally lost her. The Colonel and I walked into the woods down by the lake that afternoon and smoked a cigarette in the precise spot where the eagle had caught us so many months before. We'd just come from a town meeting where the Eagle announced the school was going to build a playground by the lake in memory of Alaska. She did like swings, I guess, but a playground? Laura stood up at the meeting, surely a first for her, and said they should do something funnier, something Alaska herself would have done. Now by the lake, sitting on a my now by the lake, sitting on a mossy, half-rotten log, the Colonel said to me, "Laura was right. We should do something for her. A prank. Something she would have loved." Like a memorial prank? Exactly. The Alaska Young Memorial Prank. We can make it an annual event. Anyway, she came up with this idea last year, but she wanted to save it to be our senior prank. But it's good. It's really good. It's historic. Are you going to tell me? I asked, thinking back to the time when he and Alaska had left me out of prank planning for barn night. Sure, he said. The prank is entitled Subverting the Patriarchal Paradigm. And he told me, and I have to say, Alaska left us with the crown jewel of pranks, the Mona Lisa of high school hilarity, the culmination of generations of Culver Creek pranking. And if the Colonel could pull it off, it would be etched in the memory of everyone at the creek, and Alaska deserved nothing less. Best of all, it did not technically involve any expellable offenses. The Colonel got up and dusted the dirt off his maw. Yeah, the Colonel got up and dusted the dirt and moss off his pants. I think we owe her that. Sorry. And I agreed, but still, she owed us an explanation. If she was up there, down there, out there, somewhere, maybe she would laugh. And maybe, just maybe, she would give us a clue she could give us the clue we needed. Alright. So that is the end of that day/chapter. On to the next. We have 20 more pages to go. This is going to be a short one. Oh, excuse me. Alright. Next day or chapter is called 83 Days After. 2 weeks later, the colonel returned from spring break with two notebooks filled with the miniature. Uh, uh, Hold on. Yeah, 2 weeks later, the colonel returned from spring break with two notebooks filled with the minutiae of prank planning, sketches of various locations, and a 40-page, two-column list of problems that might crop up and their solutions. He calculated all times to the tenth of a second, and all distances to the inch, and then he recalculated, as if he could not bear the thought of failing her again. And then on that Sunday, the colonel woke up late and rolled over. I was reading The Sound and the Fury, which I was supposed to have read by which I was supposed to have read in mid-February, and I looked up as I heard the rustling in the bed, and the colonel said, "Let's get the band back together." And so I ventured out into the overcast spring and woke up Laura and Takumi, then brought them back to room 43. The barn night crew was intact, or as close as it would ever be, for the Alaska Young memorial prank. The three of us sat on the couch while the colonel stood in front of us, outlining the plan and our parts in it with an excitement I hadn't seen in him since before. When he finished, he asked, "Any questions?" "Yeah," Takumi said. "Is that seriously going to work?" "Well, first we gotta find a stripper. And second, Pudge has to work some magic with his dad." "All right then," Takumi said. "Let's get to work." And that is the end of that chapter. They are very short well, they're going to be very short chapters until a long chapter. All right. So the next chapter is called 84 Days After. Every spring, Culver Creek took one Friday afternoon off from classes, and all the students, faculty, and staff were required to go to the gym for Speaker Day. Speaker Day featured two speakers, usually small-time celebrities or small-time politicians or small-time academics. The kind of people who would come and speak at a school for the measly $300 the school budgeted. The junior class picked the first leader, and the seniors the second. And anyone who had ever attended a speaker day agreed that they were tortuously boring. We planned to shake speaker day up a bit. All we needed to do was convince the Eagle to let Dr. William Morse, a friend of my dad's, and a preeminent scholar of deviant sexuality in adolescence, be the junior class's speaker. So I called my dad at work, and his secretary, Paul, asked me if everything was all right, and I wondered why everyone asked me if everything was all right when I called at any time other than Sunday morning. "Yeah, I'm fine." My dad picked up. "Hey, Miles, is everything all right?" I laughed and spoke quietly into the phone, since people were milling about. "Yeah, Dad, everything's fine. Hey, remember when you stole the school bell and buried it in the cemetery?" "Greatest Culver Creek prank ever," he responded proudly. "It was, Dad, it was. So, listen, I wonder if you'd help out with the new greatest Culver Creek prank ever." "Oh, I don't know about that, Miles. I don't want you getting into any. I don't want you getting in any trouble." "Well, I won't. The whole junior class is planning it, and it's not like anyone is going to get hurt or anything. Because, well, remember Speaker Day? God, that was boring. That was almost worse than class. Yeah, well, I need you to pretend to be our speaker, Dr. William Morse, a professor of psychology at the University of Central Florida, and an expert in adolescent understandings of sexuality. He was quiet for a long time, and I looked down at Alaska's last daisy and waited for him to ask what the prank was, and I would have told him, but I just heard him breathe slowly into the phone, and then he said, I won't even ask. He sighed. Swear to God you'll never tell your mother. I swear to God. I paused. It took me a second to remember the eagle's real name. Mr. Starnes is going to call you in about 10 minutes. Okay, my name is Dr. William Morse, and I'm a psychology professor in adolescent sexuality? Yep, you're the best, Dad. I just want to see if you can top me, he said, laughing. Although it killed the colonel to do it, the prank could not work without the assistance of the weekday warriors, specifically junior class president Longwell Chase, who by now had grown his silly surfer mop back. Who by now had grown his silly surfer mop back. But the warriors loved the idea, so I met Longwell in his room and said, let's go. Longwell Chase and I had nothing to talk about and no desire to pretend otherwise. So we walked silently into the eagle's house. The eagle came to the door before we knocked. The eagle came to the door before we even knocked. He cocked his head a little when he saw us, looking confused. He cocked his head a little when he saw us, looking confused, and indeed, we made an odd couple. With Longwell's pressed and pleated khaki pants, and I keep meaning to do my laundry blue jeans. The speaker we picked is a friend of Miles's dad, Longwell said. Dr. William Morse. He's a professor at a university down in Florida, and he studies adolescent sexuality. Aiming for controversy, are we? Oh, no, I said. I've met Dr. Morse. He's interesting, but he's not controversial. He just studies the way that the way that adolescents' understanding of sex is still changing and growing. He's opposed to premarital sex. Well, what's his phone number? What's his phone number? I gave the eagle a piece of a paper, and he walked to a phone on the wall and dialed. Yes, hello? I'm calling to speak with Dr. Morse? Okay, thanks. Hello, Dr. Morse? I have Miles Halter here in my home, and he tells me with I was wondering. The eagle paused, twisting the cord around his finger. Wondering, I guess, whether you, just so long as you understand that these are impressionable young people. We wouldn't want explicit discussions. Excellent. I'm glad you understand. You too, sir. See you soon. The eagle hung up the phone, smiling, and said, Good choice. He seems like a very interesting man. Oh, yeah, Longwell said very seriously. I think he will be extraordinarily interesting. And that is the end of that chapter. Ooh, baby, I don't even know what happens, but I think it's gonna be funny as fuck. Oh yeah, me too. Because I guess there's a stripper involved too. Okay, so excuse me. Um, yeah, the next chapter is called 102 Days After. My father played Dr. William Morse on the phone, but the man playing him in real life went by the name of Max with two X's, except that his name was actually Stan. Except on speaker day, his name was obviously Dr. William Morse. He was a veritable existential identity crisis, a male stripper with more aliases than a covert CIA agent. The first four agencies, the first four agencies the colonel called turned us down. Hold on. Hold on, just 1 second. Oh, I see what he did. Oh, okay, yeah, I'm getting it now. Yeah, the first four agencies the colonel called, sorry. The first four agencies the colonel called turned us down. It wasn't until we got to the B's in the entertainment section of the Yellow Pages that we found bachelorette. I don't know why it's so hard for me to say that. Bachelorette. Yeah, that we found bachelorette parties are used. The owner. Hold on. I feel like I need to say this right and say it. Bachelorette. Okay, there we go. Bachelorette parties. Yeah. It wasn't until we got to the B's in the entertainment section that of the Yellow Pages that we found bachelorette parties are used. The owner of the aforementioned establishment liked the idea of a great deal, but he said, yeah, the owner of the aforementioned, sorry, you guys. The owner of the aforementioned establishment liked the idea a great deal, but he said, Max is gonna love that, but no nudity, not in front of the kids. We agreed with some reluctance. To ensure that none of us would get expelled, Takumi and I collected $5 from every junior at Clover Creek to cover Dr. William Morse's appearance fee. Since we doubted the Eagle would be keen on paying him after witnessing the speech, I paid the colonels $5. I feel that I have earned. Yeah, but they're teenagers and they don't get that yet. Their brains aren't that developed to understand those consequences. Um, I paid the colonels $5. I feel that I have earned your charity, he said, gesturing to the spiral notebooks he'd filled with plans. As I sat through my classes that morning, I could think of nothing else. Every junior in the Every junior in the school had known for 2 weeks, and so far not even the faintest rumor had leaked. But the creek was rife with gossips, particularly the weekday warriors. And if one, and if and if just one person told one friend, who told one friend, who told one friend, who told the eagle, everything would fall apart. The creek's don't rat ethos withstood the test nicely, but when Stan slash but when Max slash Stan slash Dr. Morse didn't show up by 11:50 that morning, I thought the colonel would lose his shit. He sat on the bumper of a car on he sat on the bumper of a car in the student parking lot. His head bowed, his hands running through his thick mob of dark hair over and over again, as if he were trying to find something in there. Max had promised to arrive by 11:40, 20 minutes before the official start of speaker day, giving him time to learn the speech and everything. I stood next to the colonel, worried but quiet, waiting. We'd sent Takumi to call the agency and learn the whereabouts of the performer. Of all things I thought could go wrong, this was not one of them. We have no solution for this. Takumi ran up, careful not to speak to us until he was near. The kids were starting to file into the gym. Late, 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 late. We asked so little of our performer, really. We had written his speech, we had planned everything for him. All Max had to do was show up with his outfit on, and yet. The agency, said Takumi, says the performer is on his way. On his way? The colonel said, clawing at his hair with new vigor. On his way? He's already late. They said he should be. And then suddenly our worries disappeared as a blue minivan rounded the corner toward the parking lot, and I saw a man inside wearing a suit. That better be Max. The colonel said as the car parked. He jogged up to the front door. Also, I'm saying Max, but I'm saying the X with more oomph, because Max in this book is spelled with 2 X's, which is pretty, how should I say it? Pretty fitting for who he actually is. So if you think I'm just saying Max in a weird way, no, there's a reason why I'm saying it in a weird way. But yeah. He jogged up to the front door. I'm Max, the guy said upon opening the door. I am the nameless and faceless representative of the junior class. Yeah, I'm a nameless and faceless representative of the junior class, the colonel answered, shaking Max's hand. He was 30-ish, tanned and wide-shouldered, with a strong jaw and a dark, close-cropped goatee. We gave Max a copy of his speech, and he read it through quickly. Any questions? I asked. Yeah. Given the nature of this event, I think y'all should pay me in advance. He struck me as very articulate, even professorial, and I felt a supreme confidence, as if Alaska had found the best male stripper in central Alabama and led us right to him. Takumi popped the trunk of his SUV and grabbed a paper grocery bag with $320 in it. Here you go, Max, he said. Okay, Pudge, Pudge here is going to sit down there with you, because you are friends with Dad's, Pudge here is going to sit down there with you, because you are friends with Pudge's dad. That's in the speech. But we're hoping that if you get interrogated when this is all over, you, uh, yeah, but we're hoping that if you get interrogated when all this is over, you can find it in your heart to say that the whole junior class called on a conference to hire you. Because we wouldn't want Pudge here to get in any trouble. He laughed. Sounds good to me. I took this gig because I thought it was hilarious. Wish I'd thought of this in high school. As I walked into the gym, Max slash Dr. William Morse at my side, Takumi and the Colonel trailing a good bit behind me, I knew I was more likely to get busted than anyone else. But I'd been reading the Culver Creek Handbook pretty closely the last couple of weeks, and I reminded myself that my two pronged defense, excuse me, slurping up food here. Uh, Sorry, I totally lost it. Yeah, but I've been reading the Culver Creek Handbook pretty closely the last couple of weeks, and I reminded myself of my two pronged defense in the event that I got in trouble. One, there's not technically a rule against paying a stripper to dance in front of the school. Two, it cannot be proven that I was responsible for the incident. It can only be proven that I brought a person onto campus who I presumed to be an expert on sexual deviancy in adolescence and who turned out to be an actual sexual deviant. I sat down with Dr. William Morse in the middle of the front row of bleachers. Some ninth graders sat behind me, but when the colonel walked up with Laura a moment later, he politely told them, "Thanks for holding our seats," and ushered them away. As per the plan, Takumi was in the supply room on the second floor, connecting his stereo equipment to the gym's loudspeakers. I turned to Dr. Morris and said, "We should look at each other with great interest and talk like you're friends with my parents." He smiled and nodded his head. "He is a great man, your father, and your mother. So beautiful." I rolled my eyes, a bit disgusted. Still, I liked this stripper fellow. The Eagle came in at noon on the nose, greeted the senior class speaker, a former Alabama State Attorney General, and then came over to Dr. Morse, who stood with great aplomb. I've seen this word before, and I've read this word before, but I want to see. I think it's a plum. Okay, I was right. Okay. The Eagle came in at noon on the nose, greeted the senior class speaker, a former Alabama State Attorney General, and then came over to Dr. Morse, who stood with great aplomb and half bowed as he shook the Eagle's hand, maybe too formal. And the Eagle said, "We're certainly very glad to have you here." And Max replied, "Thank you. I hope I don't disappoint." I wasn't worried about getting expelled. I wasn't even worried about getting the colonel expelled, although maybe I should have been. I was worried that it wouldn't work because Alaska hadn't planned it. Maybe no prank worthy of her could be pulled out without her. Could be pulled off without her. The Eagle stood behind the podium. This is a this is a day of historic significance at Culver Creek. It was the vision of our founder Philip Garden that you, as students and we as faculty, might take one afternoon a year to benefit from the wisdom of voices outside the school. And so we meet here annually to learn from them, to see the world as others see it. Today, our junior class speaker is Dr. William Morse, a professor of psychology at the University of Central Florida and a widely respected scholar. He is here today to talk about teenagers and sexuality, a topic I'm sure you'll find considerably interesting. So please help me welcome Dr. Morse to the podium. We applauded. My heart beat in my chest like it wanted to applaud too, as Max walked up to the podium. Laura leaned down to me and whispered, "He is really hot." "Thank you, Mr. Sarnes," Max said. Max smiled and nodded to the eagle, then straightened his papers and placed them on the podium. Even I almost believed he was a professor of psychology. I wondered if maybe he was an actor supplementing his income. He read directly from the speech without looking up, but he read with confidence, airy tone of a slightly snooty academic. "I'm here today to talk with you about the fascinating subject of teenage sexuality. My research is in the field of sexual linguistics, specifically the way that young people discuss sex and related questions. So, for instance, I'm interested in why my saying the word arm might not make you laugh, but my saying the word vagina might." And indeed, there were some nervous twitters from the audience. The way young people speak about one another's bodies says a great deal about our society. In today's world, boys are much more likely to objectify girls' bodies than the other way around. Boys will say amongst themselves that so and so has a nice rack, while girls will more likely say that a boy is cute, a term that describes both physical and emotional characteristics. This has the effect of turning girls into mere objects, while boys are seen by girls as whole people. Okay, and then Laura stood up, and in her delicate, innocent accent, cut Dr. William Morse off. "You're so hot! I wish you'd shut up and take off your clothes." The students laughed, but all the teachers turned around and looked at her, stunned silent. She sat down. "What's your name, dear?" "Laura," she said. "Now, Laura," Max said, looking down at his paper to remember the line. "What we have here is a very interesting case study. A female objectifying me, a male. It's so unusual that I can only assume you're making an attempt at humor." Laura stood up again and shouted, "I'm not kidding! Take off your clothes!" He nervously looked around at the paper and then looked up at all of us, smiling. "Well, it is certainly important to subvert the patriarchal paradigm, and I suppose this is a way. All right, then," he said, stepping to the left of the podium, and then he shouted, loud enough that Takumi could hear him upstairs, "This one's for Alaska Young," and as the fast pumping bass of Princess as the fast pumping bass of Princess Get Off started from the loudspeakers. Dr. William Morse grabbed the leg of his pants with one hand and the lapel of his coat with the other, and the Velcro parted and his stage costume came apart, revealing Max with two X's, a stunningly muscular man with an 8-pack in his stomach and bulging pec muscles. And Max stood before us, smiling, wearing only briefs that were surely tidy, but not whitey, black leather. His feet in place, Max swayed his arms to the music, and the crowd erupted with laughter and deafening, sustained applause. The largest ovation by a good measure in Speaker Day history. The eagle was up in a flash, and as soon as he stood, Max stopped dancing. But he flexed his pec muscles so that they jumped up and down quickly in time to the music before the eagle, not smiling, but sucking his lips in as if not smiling required effort, indicated with a thumb that Max should go home. And Max did. My eyes followed Max out the door, and I saw Takumi standing in the doorway, fists raised in the air in triumph, before he ran back upstairs to cut the music. I was glad he'd gotten to see at least a bit of the show. Takumi had plenty of time to get his equipment out, because the laughing and the talking went on for several minutes, while the eagle kept repeating, "Okay, okay, let's settle down now. Settle down, y'all. Let's settle down." The senior class speaker spoke next. He blew. And as we left the gym, non-juniors crowded around us asking, "Was it you?" And I just smiled and said no, for it had not been me, or the colonel, or Takumi, or Lara, or Longwell Chase, or anyone else in that gym. It had been Alaska's prank through and through. The hardest part about pranking, Alaska told me once, is not being able to confess. But I could confess on her behalf now. And as I slowly made my way out of the gym, I told anyone who would listen. No, it wasn't us. It was Alaska. The four of us returned to room 43, aglow in the success of it, convinced that the creek would never again see such a prank, and it didn't even occur to me that I might get in trouble. Until the eagle opened the door to our room and stood above us, and shook his head disdainfully. "I know it was y'all," said the eagle. We looked up at him silently. He often bluffed. Maybe he was bluffing. "Don't ever do anything like that again," he said. But Lord, subverting the patriarchal paradigm. It's like she wrote the speech. He smiled and closed the door. And that is the end of that chapter. Oh, okay. Yeah, that is the end of that chapter. Now we will go on to the next chapter. Alright. The next chapter is called 114 Days After. A week and a half later, I walked back from my afternoon classes, the sun bearing down on my skin in a constant reminder that spring in Alabama had come and gone in a matter of hours. And now, in early May, summer had returned for a 6-month visit. For a 6-month visit. And I felt the sweat dribble down my back and longed for the bitter winds of January. When I got to my room, I found Takumi sitting on the couch, reading my biography of Tolstoy. Hi, I said. He closed the book and placed it beside him and said, January 10th. What? I asked. January 10th. That date ring a bell? Yeah, it's the day Alaska died. Technically, she died 3 hours into January 11th, but it was still, to us anyway, Monday night, January 10th. Yeah, but something else, Pudge. January 9th, Alaska's mom took her to the zoo. Wait, no. How do you know that? She told us at the barn, remember? Of course I didn't remember. If I could remember numbers, I wouldn't be struggling toward a C plus in pre-calc. Holy shit, I said as the colonel walked in. What? The colonel asked. January 9th, 1997, I told him. Alaska liked the bears. Her mom liked the monkeys. The colonel looked at me blankly for a moment and then took his backpack off and slung it across the room in a single motion. Holy shit, he said. Why the hell didn't I think of that? Within a minute, the colonel had the best solution either of us could ever come up with. Okay, she's sleeping. Jake calls and she talks to him and she's doodling and she looks at her white flower and oh god, my mom liked white flowers and put them in my hair when I was little. Then she flips out. She comes back into her room and starts screaming at us that she forgot. Forgot about her mom, of course. So she takes the flowers, drives off campus on her way to... What? He looked at me. What? Her mom's grave? And I said, yeah, probably yeah. So she gets into the car and she just wants to get to her mom's grave. But there's this jackknife truck and the cop's there. And she's drunk and pissed off and she's in a hurry. So she thinks she can squeeze past the cop car. And she's not even thinking straight. So she has to... And she's not even thinking straight, but she has to get her mom. And she thinks she can get past it somehow and poof. Takumi nods slowly, thinking, and then says, or she gets into the car with the flowers, but she's already missed the anniversary. She's probably thinking that she screwed things up with her mom again. First, she doesn't call 911, and now she can't even remember the freaking anniversary. And she's furious, and she hates herself, and she decides, that's it, I'm doing it. And she sees the cop car, and there's her chance, and she just floors it. The colonel reached into his pocket and pulled out a pack of cigarettes, tapping it upside down against the coffee table. Well, he said, that clears up things nicely. That is the end of that chapter. On to the next chapter, which is called 118 Days After. So we gave up. I'd finally had enough of chasing after a ghost who did not want to be discovered. We'd failed, maybe, but some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. I still did not know her as I wanted to, but I never could. She made it impossible for me, and the seaside. Hold on. So these are just like made up words or scrambled words. So they're not actually words. They're just scrambled up words. She made it impossible for me, and the aside, the student would never be anything else, and I was left to ask. So it's basically accident and suicide scrambled up together in two different words. Yeah, and the assasside, the student, never would never be anything else. And I was left to ask, did I help you toward the fate you didn't want, Alaska? Or did I just assist in your willful self destruction? Because they are different crimes, and I don't know whether to feel angry at her for making me part of her suicide, or just to feel angry at myself for letting her go. But we knew what could but we knew what could be found out. And in finding out, she made us closer. The Colonel and Takumi and me anyway. And that was it. She didn't leave me enough to discover her, but she left me enough to rediscover the great perhaps. There's one more thing we should do, the Colonel said as we played a video game together with the sound on. Just the two of us, like in the first days of the investigation. There's nothing more we can do. I want to drive through it, he said, like she did. We couldn't risk leaving campus in the middle of the night like she had, so we left about 12 hours earlier, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, with the Colonel behind the wheel of Takumi's SUV. We asked Laura and Takumi to come along, but we asked Laura and Takumi to come along, but they were tired of chasing ghosts, and besides, finals were coming up. It was a bright afternoon, and the sun bore down on the asphalt, so the ribbon of yes, it was a bright afternoon, and the sun bore down on the asphalt, so that the ribbon of road before us quivered with heat. We drove a mile down Highway 19. We drove a mile down Highway 119, and then merged onto I-65 northbound, heading toward the accident scene and Vine Station. The Colonel drove fast, and we were quiet, staring straight ahead. The Colonel drove fast, and we were quiet, staring straight ahead. I tried to imagine what she might have been thinking, trying again to see through time and space, to get inside her head just for a moment. An ambulance, lights and sirens blaring, sped past us, going in the opposite direction, toward school, and for an instant, I felt a nervous excitement and thought, it could be someone I know. I almost wished it was someone I knew, to give new form and depth to the sadness I still felt. The silence broke. Sometimes I liked it, I said. Sometimes I liked it that she was dead. You mean it felt good? No, I don't know. It felt pure. Yeah, he said, dropping his usual eloquence. Yeah, I know, me too. It's natural, I mean, it must be natural. It always shocked me when I realized that I wasn't the only person in the world who thought or felt such strange and awful things. 5 miles north of school, the Colonel moved into the left lane of the interstate and began to accelerate. I gritted my teeth, and then before us, broken glass glittered in the glare of the sun like the road was wearing jewelry, and that spot must be the spot. He was still accelerating. I thought, this would not be a bad way to go. I thought, straight and fast. Maybe she just decided at the last second. And poof, we are through the moment of her death. We are driving through the place that she could not drive through, passing onto asphalt she never saw, and we are not dead. We are not dead. We are breathing, and we are crying, and now slowing down and moving back into the right lane. We got off at the next exit quietly and switching drivers. We walked in front of the car. We met, and I held him. My hands balled into tight fists around his shoulders, and he wrapped his short arms around me and squeezed tight, so that I felt the heaves of his chest. As we realized over and over again that we were still alive, I realized I realized it in waves, and we held on to each other crying. And I thought, God, we must look so lame. But it doesn't matter much when you just have now realized, all the time later, that you are still alive. That is the end of that chapter. On to the next chapter. 119 days after. The Colonel and I threw ourselves into school once we gave up, knowing that we both need to ace our finals to achieve our GPA goals. I wanted a 3.0, and the Colonel wouldn't settle for even a 3.98. Our room became study central for the four of us, with Takumi and Lara over till all hours of the night talking about the sound of the Fury and meiosis and the Battle of the Bulge. The Colonel taught us a semester's worth of pre-calc, although he was too good at math to teach it very well. Of course it makes sense. Trust me. Christ, it's not that hard. And I missed Alaska. And when I could not catch up, I cheated. Takumi and I shared copies of Cliff Notes for Things Fall Apart and A Farewell to Arms. These things are just too damned long, he exclaimed at one point. We didn't talk much, but we didn't need to. Okay, that's the end of that chapter/day. Hold on just 1 second. I see that my laptop needs to be charged. Okay. The next chapter is called 122 Days After. Oh, God. Okay. Yeah, 122 days after. A cool breeze had beaten back on the onslaught of summer, and on the morning the old man gave us our final exams, he suggested we have class outside. I wondered why we could have an entire class outside when I'd been kicked out of class last semester for merely glancing outside. But the old man wanted to have class outside, so we did. The old man sat in a chair that Kevin Richmond carried out for him, and we sat on the grass. My notebook at first perched awkwardly in my lap, and then against the thick tree grass. And then I think against the thick green grass. And the bumpy ground did not lend itself to writing. And the gnats hovered. And the gnats hovered. We were too close to the lake for a comfortable sitting, really, but the old man seemed happy. Here I have your final exam. Last semester, I gave you nearly 2 months to complete your final paper. This time, you get 2 weeks. He paused. Well, nothing to be done about that, I guess. He laughed. To be honest, I just decided once and for all to use this paper topic last night. It rather goes against my nature. Anyway, pass these around. When the call came to me, I read the question. How will you personally, get out of this labyrinth of suffering? Now that you've wrestled with three major religious traditions, apply your newly enlightened mind to Alaska's question. After the exams had been passed out, the old man said, "You need not specifically discuss the perspectives of Sorry, I thought I heard something. You need not specifically uh, You need not specifically discuss the perspectives of different religions in your essay, so no research is necessary. Your knowledge, or lack thereof, has been established in the quizzes you've taken this semester. I am now interested in how you're able to fit the incontestable fact of suffering into your understanding of the world, and how you hope to navigate through life in spite of it. And, and how you hope to navigate through life in spite of it. Next year, assuming my lungs hold out, we'll study Taoism, Hinduism, and Judaism together." The old man coughed and then started to laugh, which caused him to cough again. Lord, maybe I won't last. But about the three traditions we've studied this year, I'd like to say one thing. Islam, Christianity, and Buddhism have each have founder figures: Muhammad, Jesus, and the Buddha, respectively. And in thinking about these founder figures, I believe we must finally conclude that each brought a message of radical hope. To 7th century Arabia, Muhammad brought the promise that anyone could find fulfillment in everlasting life through allegiance to the one true God. The Buddha held out hope that suffering could be transcended. Jesus brought the message that the last shall be first, that even the tax collectors and the lepers, the outcasts, had cause for hope. And so that is the question I leave you with in this final. What is your cause for hope? Back at room 43, the colonel was smoking in the room. Even though I had Hold on. Yeah, back at room 43, the colonel was smoking in the room. Even though I had one evening left of washing dishes in the cafeteria to work off my smoking conviction, we didn't much fear the eagle. We had 15 days left, and if we got caught, we'd just have to start senior year with some work hours. So how will we ever get out of this labyrinth, Colonel? I asked. If only I knew, he said. That's probably not going to get you an A. Also, it doesn't do much to put my soul at rest. Or hers, I said. Right, I'd forgotten about her. He shook his head. That keeps happening. Well, you have to write something, I argued. After all this time, it seems to me like straight and fast is the only way out. But I choose the labyrinth. The labyrinth blows, but I choose it. That is the end of that chapter. And this is going to be the last chapter of the book. Alright. This chapter is called 136 Days After. Actually, wait, let me just drink some water. Yeah, 136 days after. 2 weeks later, I still hadn't finished my final for the old man, and the semester was just 24 hours from ending. I was walking home from my final test, a difficult but ultimately, I hoped, successful battle with pre-calculus that would win me the B minus I so richly desired. It was genuinely hot out again, warm like she was, and I felt okay. Tomorrow, my parents would come and load up my stuff, and we'd watch graduation and then go back to Florida. The colonel was going home to his mother to spend the summer watching the soybeans grow. But I could talk, but I could call him long distance, so we'd be in touch plenty. Takumi was going to Japan for the summer, and Lara was again to be driven home via green limo. I was just thinking that it was all right not to know quite where Alaska was and quite where she was going that night. When I opened the door to my room and noticed a folded slip of paper on the linoleum floor. It was a single piece of lime green stationery. At the top, it read in calligraphy, from the desk of Takumi Hikohito, Hudge/Colonel. I am sorry that I have not talked to you before. Yeah, I am sorry that I have not talked to you before. I am not staying for graduation. I leave for Japan tomorrow morning. For a long time, I was mad at you. The way you cut me out of everything hurt me, and so I kept what I knew to myself. But even after, but then even after, I wasn't mad anymore. I still didn't say anything, and I don't even know really how, and I don't even really know why. Pudge had that kiss, I guess, and I had the secret. You've mostly figured this out, but the truth is that I saw her that night. I'd stayed up late with Laura and some people, and then I was falling asleep, and I heard her crying outside my back window. It was like 3:15 that morning, maybe, and I walked out there and saw her walking through the soccer field. I tried to talk to her, but she was in a hurry. She told me that her mother was dead 8 years ago. Was dead. She told me that her mother was dead 8 years that day, and that she always put flowers on her mother's grave on the anniversary. But she forgot that year. She was out there looking for flowers, but it was too early, too wintry. That's how I knew about January 10th. I still have no idea whether it was suicide. She was so sad, and I didn't know what to say or do. I think she counted on me to be the person who would always say and do the right things to help her, but I couldn't. I just thought she was looking for flowers. I didn't know she was going to go. She was drunk, just trash drunk, and I really didn't think she would drive or anything. I thought she would just cry herself to sleep and then drive to visit her mom the next day or something. She walked away, and then I heard a car start. I didn't know what I was thinking, so I let her go too, and I'm sorry. I know you loved her. It was hard not to. Takumi. I ran out of the room like I'd never smoked a cigarette. I ran with Takumi on barn night across the dorm circle to his room, but Takumi was gone. His bunk was bare vinyl, his desk empty, an outline of dust where his stereo had been. He was gone, and I did not have time to tell him what And I did not have time to tell him what I had just now realized, that I forgave him, and that she forgave us, and that we had to forgive to survive in the labyrinth. There were so many of us who would live. There were so many of us who would have to live with things done and things left undone that day. Things that did not go right. Things that seemed okay at the time because we could not see the future. If only we could see the endless string of consequences that result from our smallest actions. But we can't know better until knowing better is useless. And as I walked back to give Takumi's note to the colonel, I saw that I would never know. I would never know her well enough to know her thoughts in those last minutes. Would never know if she left us on purpose. But the not knowing would keep me from caring. And I would always love Alaska Young, my crooked neighbor with all my crooked heart. Yeah, with all my crooked heart. I got back to room 43, but the colonel wasn't home yet. So I left a note on the top bunk and sat down on the computer, and I wrote my way out of the labyrinth. Before I got here, I thought for a long time that the way out of the labyrinth was to pretend that it did not exist, to build a small, self-sufficient world in the back corner of the endless maze, and to pretend that I was not lost, but home. But that only led to a lonely life, accompanied only by the last words of the already dead. So I came here looking for a great perhaps, for real friends and more than mere life. And then I screwed up, and the colonel screwed up, and Takumi screwed up, and she slipped through our fingers, and there's no sugarcoating it. She deserved better friends. When she fucked up all those years ago, just a little girl terrified into paralysis, she collapsed into the enigma of herself. And I could have done that. But I saw where it led for her. So I still believe in the great perhaps, and I can believe in it in spite of having lost her. Because I will forget her, yes. That which came together will fall apart imperceptibly, slowly, and I will forget. But she will forget my forgetting. Just as I forgive her for forgetting me and the colonel and everyone but herself and her mom in those last moments she spent as a person. I know now that she forgives me for being dumb and scared and doing dumb and scared, and I know now that she forgives me for being dumb and scared and doing the dumb and scared thing. I know she forgives me, just as her mother forgives her. And here's how I know. I thought at first that she was just dead, just darkness, just a body being eaten by bugs. I thought about her a lot like that, as something's meal. What was her? Green eyes, half a smirk, the soft curves of her legs would soon be nothing, just bones, just the bones I never saw. I thought about the slow process of becoming bone and then fossil and then coal that will, in millions of years, be mined by humans of the future, and how they would heat their homes with her, and then she would be smoke billowing out of a smokestack, coating the atmosphere. I still sometimes think that maybe the afterlife is just something we made up to ease the pain of loss, to make our time in the labyrinth bearable. Maybe she was just matter. Yeah, let me say that again. That totally ruined the mood. Fucking motorcycle. I still think that sometimes think that maybe the afterlife is just something we made up to ease the pain of loss, to make our time in the labyrinth bearable. Maybe she was just matter, and matter gets recycled. But ultimately, I do not believe that she was only matter. The rest of her must be recycled too. I believe now that we are greater than the sum of our parts. If you take Alaska's genetic code and you add her life experiences and the relationships she had with people, then then you take the size and shape of her body, you do not get her. There is something else entirely. There is a part of her greater than some of her knowable parts, and that part has to go somewhere because it cannot be destroyed. Although no one will ever accuse me of being such a science student, one thing I learned from science class is that energy is never created and never destroyed. And if Alaska took her own life, that is the hope I wish I could have given her. Forgetting her mother, failing her mother and her friends and herself, those are awful things. But she did not need to fold into herself and self-destruct. Those awful things are survivable. But we are as indestructible as we believe ourselves to be. When adults say teenagers think they are invincible, with that sly, stupid smile on their faces, they don't know how right they are. We need never be hopeless because we can never be irreparably broken. We think that we are invincible because we are. We cannot be born and we cannot die. Like all energy, we can only change shapes and sizes and manifestations. They they forget that when we get old. They get scared of losing and failing. But that part of us greater than the sum of our parts cannot begin and cannot end. And so it cannot fail. So I know she forgives me just as I forgive her. Thomas Edison's last words were, "It's very beautiful over there." And I don't know where there is, but I believe it's somewhere. And I hope it's beautiful. And that is the end of the book. Just like I remembered it. Okay. I don't think I'm going to read the last bit. Because I've never read the last bits of any of the other books. So why should I start now? Sorry, author. But yeah. Thank you so much for listening. That was as great as an ending as I remembered it to be. The next book I will be reading will be The Great Gatsby. So I hope you'll enjoy that. And I'll see you when I'm reading The Great Gatsby. Bye-bye.